Moving on, tonight Ms. Philippa Young had a serious family matter that she had to tend to. And so she asked Ms. Judith Kuehn, our Assistant Superintendent, to present her report on the special education budget overview. And Judy has lots of experience doing this, having been a former special education director. Ms. Kuehn?
Thank you, Dr. Tiro. Mike, up there?
You're going up.
Accept.
Thank you, Mr. Devine. Thank you, school committee, for having me this evening. I'm happy to fill in for Philippa tonight as presenting the special education overview. And the reason we're doing this evening is because we are in the budget process, and people always have questions about special education and how it impacts our budget. This is not my presentation, so I apologize if I pause a little bit while I'm doing this. So the purpose of this presentation tonight is to explain the special ed process so people have an understanding of what goes into the budget, the components of the special education process that drives the budget, and why the budget fluctuates. And I think Eric on page 10 tonight of the report from the commissioning report really talks about what we've been talking about in the Hull Public Schools, that the fluctuation, the increase in students at a young age with social emotional disabilities has really had an impact on our budget and continues to. Why do we have a special education program? It's mandated, and we are mandated to provide a free and appropriate education for all students in what we call the least restrictive environment. The special education services are driven by a team process. First of all, we have a referral, and we get those referrals before children are age 3 through early intervention. So about 6 or 7 months before a child turns 3, we start our team process to see what kind of transition they will have to the integrated preschool program and have team meetings. We also have referrals through our student intervention and student assistant teams. They could be from somebody in the community that's concerned about a student. It could be a parent, or it could be a teacher. Once the referral is made to the district, a consent is sent out. The consent is signed by the parent, and then the testing begins. And it's a team, depending upon the suspected disability, that's the area that we test in. And once the consent is signed, there's 30 days to complete the testing, and then there's 15 days to have the team meeting. So you have a 45-day process there. If the student is found eligible, the team develops an individual education program called an IEP, which is based on goals. We focus on student strengths, but then we develop goals to drive the process. And we write the IEP, and it is sent out to the parents. Once we have consent, we implement the individual education program, and then services begin for that student. Each year, an annual meeting is held to review the goals and services to make sure students are making progress, and we rewrite the goals based on data collection. And every 3 years, we hold a reevaluation team meeting for all students. The purpose of special education is for students to develop compensatory strategies, and our hope is that if we do early intervention and strong intervention that's based on data and research-based interventions, that eventually they will not have to have special education services. So that's why we evaluate every 3 years. There are 10 disability areas for special education that we can find a student eligible for. Some of them are very, very obvious. Developmental delay is a global disability that takes in all different areas, and you can use it from up to age 9. Sensory would be like hearing, deaf, blind students. Emotional is clear. Communication is receptive and expressive language. And then physical, specific learning disability is when a student has a severe discrepancy between their IQ and a certain subject area. So there's about 4 different areas of specific learning disability: oral expression, basic reading skills, reading fluency, mathematics problem solving, what else? Written expression, reading comprehension, reading fluency, and I think that's about all of them. Mathematics calculation, that's the other one. So those areas are all under a specific learning disability. What else do we have here? Let's see. Team meetings take place for many reasons, not just an annual review. We often have a team meeting if when we're doing progress reports, special ed teachers are required to do progress reports every quarter. If they notice that a student is not making progress towards a goal or will not reach the goal within a year, they are to reconvene the team and rewrite that goal. We may reconvene the team if a student is having some difficulties that we need to maybe do a behavior intervention plan, or just need to get the team together and talk about what each person that is servicing them is seeing, and do we need to make any changes to the IEP. If a student's not making progress in school, what else does she have here? During transitions, we do many transition meetings between between preschool and kindergarten, 5th grade to 6th grade, and from 8th grade to 9th grade. So the staff is talking between buildings to build those transitions so students have success during the year. We also have a grant. This will be our last year for a grant that we have a transition program for at-risk 8th graders going from grades 8 to 9. This will be the 3rd summer that we run that program too. So that's a pretty significant program, and it's been very, very powerful for those kids doing their summer reading, getting some credits in the bank in math before they get to the high school. The other areas, she has a slide here about individual education programs, that they're driven by goals. So the goals are written, and the goals determine what type of services a student is going to have. Could be OT as occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, counseling, orientation and mobility, teaching for the visually impaired, and more. So the services can happen within the classroom, which would be what we call A grid, least restrictive. A grid is consultation. B grid would be within the classroom, or C grid would be a pullout, whether in an individual or with a group. So team meetings are based on the goals and least restrictive setting, and once we have the goals and what type of services are going to take place, then the team talks about, well, the placement. Will it be happening, within the school here in a collaborative setting, in a more private school setting, or where does this need to happen? So we have a continuum of settings. So this slide shows that at the top, is hospital settings, residential, a special day school, and then you'll see that here that most of the services take place in the general education classroom with some pull-out services. And then we have the next layer would be with in the classroom with some support. And then the least restrictive would be a student that only needs to have consultation. So that's that A grid I was speaking about, where the students, whoever the service provider is, maybe it's a speech and language pathologist or an occupational therapist, will be working with the teacher to talk about what kind of strategies they could implement in the classroom. What we have here is a flow of regular education and the collaborative and the Hull Public School programs. I know you heard Mike Devine mentioning some programs earlier. We have our team-based learning program that runs K through 12, so we have a program in each building. We have our TIDES program, which is for students with social emotional disabilities. That's for grades 9 through 12. And we also have a satellite program, which is for students that need a more restrictive setting, maybe due to suspensions, or they need to be not in the general population of their building. Initial referrals that happened in FY15 during the 14-15 school year. So that would be an initial referral, a first referral to special education. There were 76 referrals, and of those referrals, 64% of them were found eligible for special education. In the same FY15, there were a total of 64 reevaluations. Earlier, I talked about we have to do them every 3 years, and out of those, 83% were found not eligible. 83% were found eligible. So there were some that were found that they no longer needed special education services. Out of district students, this shows how many students that we have out of district and Right now, we're anticipating 22 that that we'll have out of district. And just because our numbers go down in our out of district doesn't mean our out of district costs will go down, because the student could be going to a more expensive placement. Maybe it's a student that's in DCF custody, and so we have a cost share and they're residential, so we have to do a day portion and DCF does the rest of it. Or they're going to a collaborative, or it just depends upon the needs of the student and what's the least restrictive environment for that student. So just because the numbers go down, it depends upon the individual student and what they need for an out-of-district placement to meet their needs. Special education transportation. We're required to provide special education transportation to our out-of-district students, and we even have students that get transportation that are serviced within our programs because of their disabilities, or we have some preschool students that also get transportation because of their disabilities. And there are no grants or federal program that reimburse for transportation costs. Out-of-district costs, this is what I talked about earlier when I was showing you the slide on our number of out-of-district students the last few years. And it's based on the individual needs and on the tuition, so it's hard to say what, we work really hard as a team with Dr. Tyrrell and our leadership and with Philippa Young to determine what our budget's going to be, but it's very, very hard to determine. These are the components of the special education budget. You'll see that 61% of it is for staff salaries. Out-of-district tuitions, 27%. Transportation, 7%. Remember, we're not reimbursed for any of that. Contracted services was 4%. This could be for if we need to have a orientation and mobility specialist or a teacher of the visually impaired in our district. Legal support was 0.7 and supplies was 0.3 as far as our budget. The special ed budget is not set, and we do, like as I said, we work as a team to predict as best we can what our special ed budget is going to be. But we could, we could have a student that we may have a student that moves into district that has a special ed, that has an IEP that requires services, and whatever's on that IEP, whether it's an out-of-district placement, a collaborative placement, we have to determine, if it's a collaborative placement, we have to determine could they be serviced in one of our programs. But whatever services they have on that IEP, we do have to implement, and that could be costly. And we could have an out-of-district person, a student move in that the team, or not move in, but we could have a student in the middle of the year that for whatever reason is not making effective progress, not doing well in school. The team reconvenes, and the team determines that they need a more restrictive setting, which could impact the budget because it's something that we didn't anticipate, and so therefore the budget goes up. Or we could have a student come back in district and the budget would go down. But we do our best to try and predict this, but we are working with students and with human beings, and it's hard to predict what sort of factor is going to impact them to cause them not to make the progress that we had hoped for. How can we keep our costs lower? Continue to strengthen our programs. We have our good response to intervention program, so that's that first instructional level in the classroom. We have our coaches working closely with our K-8 teachers for that, student assistant teams, student intervention teams that all work together, strong collaboration between regular ed and special education, and also early intervention. We have a very strong early intervention program, and having those students in the building working closely with our preschool teachers and having that strong intervention really helps with their transition across the hall to kindergarten. And also we have our special ed programs here that we listed, and maintaining those helps to keep our students in district, and they're able to be educated within their school and to be included as much as they can, with their typically developing peers. What are the reasons for offering programs? It's the least restrictive environment, its own community. It's a cost avoidance. The students have access to their peers in advance. and it's continued access to inclusion in the general education setting. And that's the end. Questions?
Very good pinch hitting.
Excellent
Yes.
job.
What?
Good.
Pitching in? Pitch hitting.
hitting.
Pitch hitting, I know. Thank you very much.
Pinch hitting.
Which didn't happen today in baseball game.
On the-
Not for the Red Sox,
Opening
at
day.
least.
Not for the Red Sox. Any questions, anybody, on the special education?
You mentioned that TBL was K through 12 and TIDES was 9 through 12. Satellite, what age group is that?
It could be 8 through 12. That you have to be careful of the 48-month difference, so we may do an afternoon session and a morning session so that we can make sure that students, we abide by that ruling of 48 months.
To separate students, that's the
Mhm.
most.
And
the
so-
least.
Also, too, there's been mention of a group of parents kind of meeting outside the CPAC bylaws. Do we have CPAC bylaws?
Yes, we have CPAC bylaws. We just had our comprehensive program review last year, and we do have appropriate CPAC bylaws, and we have Monique Roach is our parent representative. And when we send out the parent rights brochures at the beginning of the year, which we're required to do, the meetings for each month are there with the topics, and we encourage participation. Last month we had we had Jessica Bonagario, who's one of our Title I reading teachers, did a presentation on reading strategies for parents. So it is advertised like on the Blue Notes and through emails, and so no one's been meeting outside of the CPAC guidelines.
I might be able to clarify the confusion. When we did have the review, the only recommendation that was there was that the special education director should not be the chair of the CPAC.
Yes.
And historically, that had been the case because when Judy was in charge of special education, she begged for a volunteer to chair the CPAC.
We didn't want
Nobody
it.
stepped up.
No one wanted to do
When
it.
Philippa became in charge of special education, she asked the parents if they would volunteer to be the chair. She couldn't get a volunteer. This time, I don't know what she did, but Monique Roach said
She
yes
did.
I
this
think she
time.
felt
So
sorry
we're
for
in
her.
complete compliance. That was the only issue that was not in compliance.
And before in our CPI, in our comprehensive program reviews, they had accepted that because we had the documentation in meetings and notes that we had tried to, and they're like, no, just keep going. And even though Philippa also had that documentation, they really wanted to see a parent in that role.
It's hard to get parents to commit to that.
And we've done some joint meetings with other CPAC groups that we had Sarah Ward here one evening to talk with parents, and invited people from other communities, and other CPAC groups have invited our parents to come too.
So we were happy
So-
that that parent stepped up.
So it sounds like there's a lot of great information and presentations happening for that group. I was just kind of doing some research on it to learn more about that group because I'm not familiar with that segment. And I just wanted to know, it says there's some bylaws, Massachusetts statute and regulations, 71B Section 3 and 603 CMR 28. And it says, it refers to, and can get clarification on this, that the CPAC is supposed to report back to the school committee, and that they're supposed to give at least one presentation annually. Is that true?
Well,
I think,
I'd have to go back and look
Yeah.
at the bylaws, and I can send you a copy of our bylaws that have been approved. But the information that we get from the CPAC, if it's been, they haven't had an official meeting with the school committee, but they're very welcome to, but the parents haven't been interested in doing that. There's really a trustful relationship between the parents and the special education director and the parents, and Mary Ann can talk about it too, because she was a member for years. They really felt like their voice was heard. When I was there with them, their voice was heard, and so that Dr. Terrell and the school committee members heard about it, and Mary Ann was on the school committee, so she was at those meetings. So I really think that they felt their voice was heard. They felt like their students were getting quality services, and so there really were no complaints, and they were getting very well funded. Everything they needed for supplies was always granted. So
I don't think, I'm not trying to say that they're not happy or they're not. I'm just trying to understand if they're supposed to report to us and kind of give us more information, share kind of knowledge that they're experiencing or information that they want us to know. It says what's it called? I'll just read Chapter 71, Section 1C. Workshops on rights of students and their parents under special education. Each school district shall conduct in cooperation with the local parent advisory council at least one workshop annually within the school district on the rights of students, their parents, guardians.
And that's what we
And
do.
I'm not sure if
That's the first meeting of the year that we do, and we use the presentation that the DESE gives us each year. So we do that every year. Yeah, that's what? Right.
I'll just tell you this. I haven't turned down a single request of anybody who wants to make any sort of presentation in front of the school committee in a year, and I don't know that anyone has before either. So anybody that wants to come and address the school committee is more than welcome.
I mean, since Riley was 3, I've been on the CPAC. So, I mean, he's graduating from high school this year. And parents just don't want to be in that leadership role with the CPAC, especially, as you said, there's the real trust that has developed. I mean, when I was first on it, truthfully, there wasn't a lot of trust with what was going on. So we were pushing and pushing and pushing. Then when Maggie Rizzi came in, she started to listen. And then when Judy came in, we were listened to even more. So at this point, parents are really busy. A lot of us are really shy and do not want to get up in front of people and present.
On TV.
Right, yeah, on TV. But because the level of trust has changed so much over the oh my God, 12 years, I would say, we are doing things by the bylaws. There are some, shortcuts that parents are taking, but I think mostly it has to do with time management. People just don't have the time, especially if you have a child with significant special needs at home and you don't have someone to take care of that child when you go out to a meeting. So that weighs in too. So I think that's probably why none of us have volunteered to come up here to talk about it, But there's an awful lot of presenters you bring to the group, and now Philippa is bringing to the group. A lot more education is going on, a lot more discussions going on between the 3 schools than ever before. But it's, 20% of the entire population, so it's not as visible.
And we do invite all parents to come, like for the reading,
Right, yeah.
the reading presentation that we had last month. We do invite all parents to come because everybody can benefit from how to implement, research-based strategies, in your home for your child. There is a CPAC meeting tomorrow night at 6:30 at the middle school that Philippa will be co-chairing with Monique Roach, and I know they're looking to develop a survey that they're going to put out to what topics people are interested in, how can we get more people to attend the meetings. So that's what they're working on tomorrow night, so please come.
So Judy, if parents are interested and maybe they were unaware, they don't receive the Blue Notes or other forms, they seem to have missed it, what is the best way for them to connect with the CPAC?
If they call the Student Services Office to Kathy Jokum, we'll get them on the email.
It's on cable too, I think, and I think the Hull Times will publish the meeting.
Right. Yeah, they do. We usually do put it on cable too. So.
Yeah. So I mean, that's
Some of
two
us
more.
don't have cable.
Right.
Oh, okay.
At least 2 more.
Yeah.
At least it's 2 more. It is hard
So
to
that's
do.
great. So thank you for everyone that's watching. They'll know now.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I just want to say thanks for doing this presentation. And Riley was born, and 2 weeks later he was in early intervention. So he has been in these programs his entire life, and the town of Hull has basically owned Riley since he was 3. He was in the integrated preschool, and now he's graduating in June. But you also still own Riley because you have to supply an education to him until he's 22.
22, correct.
So he's going to his postgraduate program in another district, but Hull has to pay for that. So there are these costs that are incurred for these kids with special needs. He was in his hometown, his home school for his entire career, so that allayed some of the expense, but it's still an expensive proposition to have a child with special needs, because you not only have to make sure he's getting what he needs within the school, it's an entire village that's doing this, and the timelines that have to be adhered to and the paperwork is beyond onerous. It's ridiculous what has to be done, but it's so necessary. So I applaud your staff. The amount of work that goes into every single child who is on an IEP in this district, the amount of time, the amount of paper that is supplied prior to even educating that child is astounding. So bravo. And you're doing that on very limited funds. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nice job on Philippa's presentation.
Yeah.
I had a point. I don't know if you did, David. I just wanted to point out one thing that just always struck me. I certainly appreciate Philippa putting this together, and as well as you doing it, is that just the explosion in our budget of special education, both expenses and salaries. It's just right in here. From you just look at fiscal year 13 compared to our fiscal year 17 budget. Out of district tuitions, you said in the presentation they range from $35,000 to $170,000. We have 22 children, and the total in the budget line item is $1.2 million, and it comes out to the average is $55,000 a student. That's just significant, and it's one of these things that not only do these kids have rights to, but it is also obviously the right thing to do for these students, and it's beyond commendable what the school department does to try to provide in-house programming to sort of limit the number of kids going out of district, not only for cost savings, but also to keep kids in their own communities and reduce the travel time and transportation, and keeping kids with their own friends and neighbors as well. Just in terms of the overall, the special education expenses and salaries compared to fiscal year 13, just 4 years ago, has gone up 32%. At the same time, our overall budget number has only gone up over 4 years, 14%. So obviously, there's a tremendous pressure that we're experiencing in terms of budget. And so when people talk about how much money we spend on a per pupil basis here in the whole public schools, how is it that when we have a declining enrollment, we still have an increasing budget? I mean, there's many drivers, there's many factors, but you just have to look at the special education needs of our children that have to be met and must be met. And that's a large chunk of why it is that we have fewer kids, but it costs more. And it's just something that I just hope people can realize. The information is right in on our budget. The actuals from 13, 14, and 15 are all in there with the 17 budget and the 16 budget. So if people would just pay a little more attention, it would be better for everyone.
And it's amazing to watch Mr. Devine, Mr. Rivnak, and Mrs. Capadonna work with the teams and with Philippa Young to do what they can to keep costs down and to keep the kids in the district within the programs. They work really, really hard to be creative. They work with a BCBA. They work with all the team, and yet still some students, still need to go out of district,
Right.
but they work really, really hard to do what they can to meet the needs of the students within the programs that we have. So.
I'm trained as an advocate also, and for such a small district, we have a really good reputation for how we deal with our special needs students. Some of these affluent communities are not doing their jobs. These kids are not being educated in the ways that they should be educated. There isn't the caring from principals, vice principals. Superintendents have been quoted as saying, just cut the cost, get them off the IEP. That doesn't happen in this district. From Dr. Tyrrell on down, we take care of all of our students. And that's the reputation that we're building. And it's an expensive proposition, but it's the right thing to do. It's unfortunate that some of our neighboring communities just don't feel the same way. So again, pat yourselves on the back, toot your horn with this one, because you guys are doing a pretty good job.
I do have to commend Dr. Terrell for, her knowledge of special education and her support for it, because she has, even when I was the director, and I know Philippa does the same thing, that we in constant communication with her about these students, where they're going, where it's heading, is it money going down, is it going up, and we meet as a group and we redo the budget all the time, but she has never ever said, you can't do that, or she always says, do what's right for the student. And I know other colleagues that have worked with superintendents that are in fear of having to go and say, oh, we have this money or something like that. So she should be commended, for that leadership.
Absolutely.
Well, this will be a love-in. You make it easy to do that, so thank you very
Am I
much.
done?
What did you say? Parts.
Any more questions?
Is she done?
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy. You might want to pack up.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's Graham.
that would be my suggestion.